iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the iHeartPodcast speaker series. I'm Greg Ashlock, president of the iHeart Influencer Network, standing in for Will Pearson today. So it's my distinct honor, super excited about this, to host the happiest podcast roundtable ever about Magical Rewind. It's one of our newest podcasts of the iHeart family. It's featuring conversations around iconic, wonderful world of Disney productions and Disney Channel original movies. It's a walk down nostalgia lane, and it pretty much puts a smile on everybody's face. I know when I started listening to them, it did for me. With us today, and part of the Disney DNA, are the hosts of the Magical Rewind. So, Will Friedle.
Hey, how are you?
You may remember Will from Boy Meets World, amongst a million other things that he's done, and Sabrina Bryan. Sabrina,
hey,
who you probably remember as one of the stars of the Cheetah Girls franchise and a million other things as well. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us today to have this conversation about Magical Rewind.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. This is so exciting. We have started this podcast what feels like so long ago, just because our level of anticipation and excitement to get it out there for the fans, and now we're here, and it's so incredible that we're iHeart has welcomed us with like the biggest open arms. It's been so magical already.
We're super excited to have you in the family, and we just met for the first time, a few minutes ago. And when you both popped on the screen and you're smiling from ear to ear, I wouldn't have expected anything different from the host of Magical Rewind. So I'm ready to jump in if you guys are. Can we jump in so everybody can get to know a little bit more about this podcast and about the two of you?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So, Will, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
I'm always so curious when there's a podcast that comes out like this. How did the idea start? Like, how did this all come about? Can you give us a little bit of a background on that?
I can. So I was doing another show called Pod Meets World. And
by the way, you won't say it, but ridiculously successful. Like it came out of the gate.
Yeah.
So
Pod Meets World has been doing very, very well. Thank you. Yes, we've partnered with iHeart. We were all deliriously happy with how Will Pod has been doing. And we started to get more and more. We've also do live shows, and we're doing conventions, and especially at the conventions, more and more people were asking me about My Date with the President's Daughter, which is a movie that I did for Wonderful World of Disney back in 1997. It's had this amazing resurgence, and I'm a big fan of podcasts. I listen to them every day if I'm not recording them, which now I am more often than not. And I was on a walk with my dog, which is where I always listen to my podcasts. And I just started thinking about Wonderful World of Disney and My Date with the President's Daughter. And then I started thinking about all these old school Disney movies. And I literally on the walk shut off. I think I was listening to a Pod Meets World edit that we were doing. So we also have to listen to edit everything down. So I was listening to an edit, and I paused it and called Amy Sugarman on the walk and said, hey, I got something. I think I want to rewatch Wonderful World of Disney's. And she went, I love that idea. Now we got to find you a co-host. Literally that fast. It was that quick. That's how it started. I mean, that's not to denigrate the industry in any way, shape, or form, because it's an industry I've been in my entire life and I love, but the industry's changed a lot. And a lot of times when you're dealing with giant corporations like Disney or anything like that, you come up with an idea and you can't even get a no for a year. Whereas with the thing that I love about iHeart and Amy and all the people we're working with is she was like, this is great. Let's do this. I love this. And it was that fast. And then we got into it.
Yeah, it's like the resources of a big legacy company, but the mentality of a startup. And Amy is an activator, so she just jumps on things, which that's what we love about Amy. But so let me ask you a question. Was the catalyst, though, the confidence you got from Pod Meets World that like there is a marketplace for this? There's a passion for this content that I didn't realize existed. And so I think that there's even a larger marketplace for us to expand into.
Yes, it was definitely helpful, knowing how, I mean, first of all, Pod Meets World, Boy Meets World, we have the greatest fans in the world. We always have. They've been so loyal to us. They've stuck with us for 30 years. They're coming back to us in droves for Pod Meets World. We're just having so much fun. But that coupled with the resurgence for My Date with the President's Daughter, because we knew we wanted to start with that movie. And then when Amy called me and said, we talked about co-hosts, we talked about different people, how we were going to go, what direction we were going to go. And Amy called me and said, have you heard of the Cheetah Girls? And I went, of course I've heard of the Cheetah Girls. Everybody's heard of the Cheetah Girls. And she went, how about Sabrina? And before she finished the name, I was like, perfect. That's perfect. We're in, we're good. And that was it.
So let me ask you about that. I love how quick that all happened, but I got to back up, because when I listened to your first episode, because by the way, it's only been on for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And so like when you did your first episode, until I didn't know that the two of you hadn't worked together or didn't know each other like personally. So I listened and I thought that the chemistry and just kind of like the connectivity, was that something you guys had to work on a while? Is it just natural? Because to me, it felt like that you guys had been friends for a while if you listen in.
Yeah. Well, so I was lucky enough to get the call and was given, kind of the groundwork of what this new podcast idea was, and that it would be with Will Friedle. And I'm like, Boy Meets World? Yes, I will take that meeting. Are you kidding me? I know what they are doing with, their podcast. Pod Meets World is giant. I think I went and did a little bit on their actual podcast, and I was the one that let them know they actually have a radio advertisement that I had been listening. I had heard in the morning several times on Kiss FM, which is the radio station I listen to in the morning on my way to work or, out taking my kids to school, things like that. And they didn't even know that it was on, which was so funny on their.
We were like, wait, we have a radio spot. She's like, yeah, I hear it all the time.
It's like every morning I hear it. And so anyway, I had known about the podcast. I obviously grew up. I was a Disney kid through and through. I watched the channel probably every day after school. So I grew up on Boy Meets World and, loved it. And I've loved how they've transitioned that into a podcast and being able to go back. And one of the things that we love doing on the podcast is kind of letting the viewers dive into the fact that we haven't known each other for a long time. We are getting to know each other, and through these movies and rewatching and getting each other's reactions and learning about each other, we've become friends throughout the process. And that was something we were really adamant from the beginning is, we had only talked a few times, then we met actually face to face at a photo shoot. And through that, we were talking about, we didn't want it to feel disingenuous. We wanted it to be very organic, and we weren't going to try to put across that we've known each other for years. And talked about that get to know you process should definitely be a part of the podcast. But after the first taping, all the producers from iHeart that were listening in were saying, it sounds like you guys have known each other for years. Like your chemistry, it was so easy. It felt like talking back to a friend that I've had for a while, and still learning about him. He's not a big fan of musicals. I'm a giant fan of musicals. And so, we talk about that in our podcast of what draws us in and what's special to us and how we can kind of banter back and forth of those kinds of things. And he's got a great sense of humor. He's so hilarious. He has me cracking up the whole time. And so it's just been so easy.
Yeah. And it shows that you guys both have a passion for the project too. Like when you start talking about the films that you're going to talk about today, both of you kind of light up on the air. Like you can hear your voice getting excited to share some of the experiences. And it's great that you guys have this common passion behind the podcast.
Well, it's also, just piggybacking off of what Sabrina said, Pod Meets World, one of the reasons that people love Pod Meets World so much is because they can tell that we grew up together. Danielle Ryder and I have known each other for 30 years. It's effortless. We're family, and we're using that word properly. A lot of people throw that word around, but we really are. Sabrina and I met, and as we were talking the first time, we were like, we can't fake this. You can't fake, hey, we've known each other forever, and this is the way it's going to be. It's like, so let's go exactly the opposite. Let's let people know we don't know each other. Let's let people know, especially when it comes to these movies that are movies you watch as a kid, we're like 10, 12 years apart, even a little bit farther. That's night and day when it comes to Disney Channel and the movies that you watch. So my Disney Channel movies and Disney movies that I grew up with are different than her Disney Channel movies and what she grew up with. And so we were like, let's lean into that. Let's lean into the getting to know you process, because people aren't stupid, and fans of podcasts especially aren't stupid, and they can tell when you're faking it. So it's like, we're not gonna fake this. We're gonna just get to know each other the entire time. I'm gonna be sometimes the curmudgeon old guy going, "What? The music's too loud. I don't understand this movie." And she's sometimes gonna be going, "God, this movie's so old. I don't understand." And we wanted that to be what people experience. So as we're getting to know each other, that's happening more and more.
Well, it's working. And by the way, Sabrina, you brought something up that I have to stop down on. That part about you hearing it on Kiss FM, that's actually our secret sauce at iHeart too, is that we've got this massive broadcast network to tell people about the amazing podcast that we have. So it's this built-in marketing engine. And so I love the fact that that's how you discovered it. Like, that's awesome. So it's just
that
validation.
is exactly how it was. I was driving and went, what? I need to hear this, and I'm like, cool. So I definitely clicked on and started subscribed. It worked 100%. I am like, so sold.
That's great.
All right, so let me keep going. Let me keep us going here. Sabrina, what was it like? I think a lot of people would be interested in this, growing up in the Disney family, like from an insider's perspective. What can you share with us? Because there's this, this expectation that Disney does things a certain way. Like, what can you share about that?
I loved being a part of the family. Disney puts out nothing but good messaging. And, even at a younger age, you knew that you were a part of, for the Cheetah Girls, we were a part of kind of the beginning of a girl power movement, just really leaning into inspiring young girls. But another part of my experience was, before I'd been auditioning, I'd guest starred on several different things, within the channel or on ABC. And, you walk around the stage and you would see so many of the young actors that were what's called triple threat. So they weren't just acting, they could dance, they could sing. There was just so many of them, especially when I joined the channel. And at the time, Cheetah Girls was really the first big musical that they put on as a DCOM. And yet when you walk around, obviously the sets, there were so many of them that could they were multifaceted. They could do a lot of different things. And it was awesome to be at the forefront of when they started to really lean in and give their channel stars opportunities to sing on, albums like Disney Mania, which was a full soundtrack of Disney Channel stars that were remaking movies from the Disney, cartoon movies, the classic, the actual animated movies. And they were redoing them in their own way, whether they're making a song into a rock song or a fast song into a slow song. And so that was kind of the beginning of all of that. And then it comes to High School Musical and now Descendants, which, by the way, I've said it so many times, I am such a huge fan of this Descendants now. And that's from Magical Rewind podcast. Literally, I've never watched it before. And now I'm a giant fan. I can't wait to watch all of them. But now you're looking at the channel and they have so many artists. Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, it's like insane to know that I was at like the beginning part of that. So, being a part of the Disney Channel is like being a part of iHeart. It's a giant, huge, mega machine that just knows how to do it right. And that's one thing about the Disney Channel that I will always be appreciative, that I got a chance to work with a company that just nails it out of the park every time.
Was there like training and education? Was it more like being part of a university than it was like, okay, just this episode? Was there that
go to Disney school? Go to Disney school.
Yeah. Kind of, or no?
I don't know. Did you feel that, Will? I feel like as you go along, you got better. As I went along, I would be around other, channel stars that knew how to do press better, knew how to, how to walk the red carpet a little bit better. But it was kind of trial and error. There just certainly wasn't like a sit down school process. But I think being around, when you come across somebody who's been on the channel longer, you kind of watch how they do it. And and start sort of get your own stride, but learn from each other, because we were all so many people on the channel as you're working are just so young, and a lot of times it's like your first big thing to do.
So a question for both of you: when you have your guests on, is it, for the Disney, does it feel more like a fraternity and sorority of like friends instead of guests? You call them guests, but are they really? Because it seems like it's a small world
Yeah.
that, everybody kind of knows each other.
It is.
Yes?
It's, what's funny is it's there's two kind of schools going together, two fraternities going together, because you have the one that's certainly the Disney family. And when you're in that Disney family, it is, you get the secret handshake, and it's like you're going from one fraternity to another across the country, but you're still, you've gone through the same thing, so you know each other. But then on top of that, you also have the added fraternity of being a child actor. So there's kind of the double, hey, we've been there, we know what you've been through, good and bad, because there's parts of being a child actor that are the best, the greatest thing you could ever have in your life. It is phenomenal. There's parts that are really, really terrible, and then there's everything in between. So when you're dealing with people that have some of the same life experiences, even if they're younger than you, older than you, there is that kind of wink and a nod of, hey, I've been there. I mean, William Daniels, who played Mr. Feeney on Boy Meets World, going to be 97 years old, he still gives us the kind of, hey, I was a child actor, I've been there. He'll say that to us. So that's something that it bonds you. And the second you bring on any of these guests, we've talked to people from Brink, we've talked to people from The Descendants, we've talked to people, I mean, it doesn't matter who we bring on, you're starting from a place of, I know what you've been through, I know what it's like, I know how much fun it is, I know this kind of some of the stories you have, so let's get into it. So there is that kind of camaraderie that's instantly built in when these guests come on.
You can feel it. There feels like just a natural camaraderie that you have. Two quick things. One is one question for you, Will, and then we'll bring a question to both of you. How different is it rewatching and talking about films now at a different stage in life than when you went through it? Because when you were talking about My Date with the President's Daughter, you're like, I haven't seen that film in like years, but it was such a big film for you. How different is it rewatching and now than what you thought, when you saw it 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I had not seen My Date with the President's Daughter, I think, since it came out or close to it. So that was 97. So almost 30 years. It's strange. I always tell people it's like watching, it's like you have home movies, but they're home movies of you that everybody got to see. So when you see, when you watch your home movies, your birthday parties when you're 8, 9 years old, you don't remember the party, you don't remember even the video, but you might have memories of what present you got. I mean, so that's what it's like watching these movies or watching Boy Meets World when we do that, where you don't necessarily remember the shooting, you don't remember the episode, but you might remember something that happened on the set that day. You might remember, yeah, that's right, that guest star and I ended up going out one time. We had a date or we had dinner. So it brings back something to where then it opens a whole new line of memories. It's very interesting to see, because you're watching them. I have home movies from the time I started professionally acting at 10 years old to now that I can turn on and stream whenever I want. And it's really kind of an interesting
like a whole new experience.
Yeah,
and I think
really is.
I think that's definitely something that our podcast is really a little bit different for us, because we have our own experiences like that. So we have a little bit more intel when we bring those guests on to ask them, like, we know other stuff happened on backstage, what was this like? Or when you were filming at that, location, or, Will talking about in our first episode, he talks about how excited he was to work with the giant actor. So when we know that someone else has done that, we ask that question, whether it was in that movie or not, because that we know from experience when it was our time, how big it was for us in our career at the moment, what we learned from it. So I think with our podcast, we get to bring that special element versus it just being rewatching the movies, maybe having a guest on, kind of going through it, but to not really have that experience yourself. That's something that I feel is a little just extra sparkle that we bring to our podcast.
And the one thing Disney does almost better than anybody else is no matter when you watch one of their movies, you're going to get something different out of it. So if you're 8 years old watching a movie, you're going to get one thing. If you're 15, you're going to get something else. If you're 25, you're going to get something else. If you're 47, you're going to get something else. So every time you watch these movies or these TV shows that Disney is putting out, it changes. When I was watching Boy Meets World back in the day, I was identifying with my character and Corey because they were closest in age. When I'm watching them now, I'm identifying with the parents. Eventually, God willing, I'm going to be old enough to then be identifying with Mr. Feeney. Everything you watch, you're watching from the generation that you are at the time. And that's one thing that Disney does almost better than anybody else. So I had never seen these DCOMs. So now I'm watching through the eyes of the parents as opposed to watching through the eyes of the kids.
Or there's totally things different. That you pick up on when we're watching Brink. I'm asking, why is that kid's helmet not locked in? Where is the safety patrol? You know, and it brings like a funny element because you're thinking, and I probably never noticed. And if I did notice when I was watching it back in the day, I probably thought it was cool. Now I'm like, somebody get on that kid and buckle his freaking helmet, you know? So it's so those kinds of things that add a little bit of a funny twist to it because we are seeing it in a totally different set of eyes this time around.
Hey, last question, just because we're running out of time, and so you guys can answer this one, either one of you or both. Scripted versus unscripted. You've done both. Like your thoughts and preferences. Like I'm just curious for somebody that grew up. We know you from a scripted world, but now you've played an unscripted. Like I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'll go first because Will's got so much more experience than I do. This is super new for me on the podcast world. I love it. I first of all love that I'm in my own home and I'm able to I don't have to drive all the way to LA. That part is amazing. But I feel really free and able to express my thoughts, my opinions, keep it fun, keep it light. That's how I am, you know, super laid back. I will say differently on unscripted when I was on Dancing with the Stars. I didn't love that part so much. There was a lot more, because I was on like a competition show, I felt really guarded because that was also the first time I did the show was when they first started having chat forums. And I was dumb enough to go in one and check it out. And, you know, what I would say on camera seemed a little bit more competitive than what I wanted it to come across, you know, things like that. So I felt really guarded here, especially because there is no competition. We are just here to have fun and, you know, bring back the incredible memories. I feel so free and able to really just kind of be myself on camera. I obviously love acting. That's what got me in the industry. I love portraying a character, but I'm having the time of my life doing this. And I'm so thankful that iHeart's given me this opportunity because I feel like I've been doing this, like that I found a niche that I never realized I would love so much.
That's great. Anything you would add to that, Will, or same thoughts?
Scripted is a great way to disappear into another character. Unscripted is a great way to disappear more into yourself. That's how I would say it.
Nice. See, look at that.
I feel like you had prepared for that. And you didn't even know what the question was going to be, but I feel like that's pretty good.
I did.
Listen, really enjoyed the conversation with both of you today. Looking forward to future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody that was able to join and listen in today, thank you. And we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.